I had noticed several citizens, police officers, and firemen that were trying to dig at the rubble, trying to get the people out. And on the upper floors, there was people that were sitting at their desks that when you first looked at them, you really didn't know that they were dead. But when you got a closer look, you saw that there was no way they can be sitting there alive with metal fragments through their bodies. There were just people sitting at their desks just waiting for somebody to come and get them, it's what it seemed like. But there was people that were blown out of the windows.
Oklahoma State Representative Charles Key held a press conference at the Oklahoma Capitol. Several witnesses and experts were available for questions. Key expert at the conference was recently retired Brigadier General Benton Parton. General Parton was one of the top ballistics experts in the United States Air Force. He retired from the Air Force with 31 years of service.
And I spent 31 years in the Air Force. 25 years of that was in research and development and weapons. I went through extensive training, technical training, in the weapons area and all the associated technologies. I started off working in the ballistic research laboratories, building warheads, testing them against all kinds of targets. And I served in the Air Force Systems Command level twice, Air Staff level twice, and in the Office of the Secretary of Defense in this particular area. And I was the first chairman of the Air Munitions Requirements and Development Committee, which harmonized the requirements for the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. It was a purposeful job that I had a 06 level from each of the services, and we were under all of the air weapons that all four services used. When I saw the damage to the building, and with my knowledge of explosives, demolitions, what you can do and what you can't do with explosives, I had a problem, a big problem, very quickly. You can't destroy hard targets with blast. It just doesn't work. And reinforced columns in a building are hard targets. And I spent much of my career working on precision-guided weapons because I knew what you could do and what you can't do with explosives against hard targets. A 24-inch reinforced concrete column is a hard target. It's a very hard target. Now I got all the information I could about the structure of the building, the columns, the layout, and the position, supposed position of the truck bomb. And I made a layout, and I did some analysis to determine how realistic it was to have brought down the columns and the pattern it was brought down. Can everyone see this with their cameras? At first, when I did this, I was concerned, and I was preparing a report and a letter to go to the Senate and the House because I felt somebody needed to take an independent investigation because what was coming out of Oklahoma was not consistent with reality. It just was not consistent with reality. I distributed a letter to about 25 senators and 35 congressmen. There were 58, I think, total letters that I hand-delivered to all those offices. And trying to get them to take some initiative action to see that the proper forensic investigation was done by an independent body before that building was brought down. And at that particular time, it was some question about the precise location of the column, about the truck bomb. I said, well, if it was the truck bomb that did the damage, it would have had to have been located somewhere adjacent to this column, which I labeled A3. There are 13 columns in each row, and it's 3D, and I labeled the columns, this row A, this row B, this row C, and column A1 through 11 to the other side. Actually, the truck bomb was just beyond A4 over at this point, but the reach into the building the building is really relatively symmetrical here with respect to damage and vulnerability. So you would expect symmetry with respect to detonation and with respect to the damage and the detonation. Now, with the truck bomb over here, and I stated in the letter to the Senate and the House, I said if it was the truck bomb that did the damage in row B, column row B, then the maximum reach would have been relatively adjacent to B. Because if you look at the circles, they're pretty flat reaching back here. That's the constant level of pressure, roughly the constant level of pressure. And you see that they're not too different between B2, B3, and B4. So you would have to consider it marginal if, in fact, that column was brought down by the truck. But when you move the bomb over here to beyond A4, where the center of the crater is, then you would have had to have brought down, the maximum reach of that would have been here at B4 or B5, and it should have gone B4 down to B5 and on B3. And because of the steep gradient in pressure, you have a big, big difference between the impulse that column B3 saw and column B4 or B5. You don't need to go any further than that. That's ipso facto evidence that column B3 had to have had a demolition charge on it. There's just no other explanation.
The laws of physics, coupled with a lifetime of experience with explosives and munitions, convinced General Parton that the magnitude and the pattern of the damage done to the Murrah building were totally inconsistent with a single truck bomb, especially one detonated outside of the building. When I first saw the pictures of the truck bomb's asymmetrical damage to the federal building, General Parton said, my immediate reaction was that the pattern of damage would have been technically impossible without supplementing demolition charges at some of the reinforced concrete column bases, a standard demolition technique. Could there have been more than one explosion? Let's go to Sarkis Energy Center at the University of Oklahoma and hear Dr. Brown's explanation of the seismographic evidence which was recorded on April 19th.
On the day of the April 19th explosion, there were two seismograms recorded that are thought to be associated with the explosion. One of these was at the Omniplex Museum. It's shown here with the abbreviation OMO for Omniplex, Oklahoma as the indication. That instrument was 4 miles to the northeast. The second seismogram was recorded at station FNO, or Franklin Norman, near the University of Oklahoma campus, and is run by the Oklahoma Geological Survey. That instrument is a little over 16 miles to the southeast. Those two instruments then gave us an indication and a measure of what was happening during the explosion. But the understanding of the various signals that were arriving was not very clear. And so during the demolition of the Murrah building, additional study was conducted in collaboration with the U.S. Geological Survey. We put one of their instruments next to our instrument in Norman. We put one of their instruments next to the seismometer at the Omniplex. We put an additional one of their instruments at a Baptist church, a Southern Baptist church on 89th Street. And finally, we went right on the demolition site and put our